everyone, and a really warm welcome to another courageous conversation here on the Tree Sisters Facebook page. My name is Pollyanna Darling, and I look after community engagement and strategy for Tree Sisters. And these courageous conversations are a celebration of women's voices and wisdom and courage, and we're really glad that you can be with us today. So today I'm really thrilled to be speaking with Danielea Castell, and she's going to be joining us very soon, and until we have her on camera I'm going to just read to you her bio so you can find out a bit more about her. So Danielea is a nature empath, planetary sound weaver, performance artist and InterBeing Ambassador whose primary love bond is with Mother Nature. Accepting this fact in 2008 opened the doorway to her understanding the true nature of her empathic gifts and her life purpose: to serve interbeing harmony and reciprocity on Earth. For the past 11 years, Danielea has been learning about interbeing relations from elder trees and water bodies around the world. She carries the spirit and blessings of a salmon-bearing river, a Shiva Mountain, and more recently a wild fig tree known as the All-Healing Mother. Together their mission is to support urban trees and rivers who wish to connect more deeply with humans. They offer community ceremonies called gratitude interventions that involve deep listening, touch and sound weaving. Danielea founded the Water Gratitude Project in 2012 and released her Thank You Water CD in 2017. And I can see right now that she's requesting to come on camera, so I will just approve that. She's a member of the Global Rights of Nature movement and led water ceremony at the United Nations in 2017 for the 6th Annual Forum on Harmony with Nature. Danielea is a new tree sister and is in the process of becoming a water carrier. Welcome, very warm welcome to you, Danielea.
Yay, we did it.
We did it.
I'd like to offer a musical invocation to begin. Some of you may know the Vedic mantra Om Satyam, Om Shivayam, Om Sundaram. And the intention is to invoke supreme truth, supreme beneficence or generosity of the heart, and supreme beauty. And so I offer this up because sound helps unify me inside, in my heart, which is the place that I choose to speak from. And also sitting out here with Grandfather Sun above and the Chilkat River in front and Mother Earth below my feet and the Brother Wind in the trees behind me. As an interbeing representative, I just really want them to know that their voices are welcome. And if there's something that they wish me to say or communicate, or a way that I can represent the unity of humanity and nature, that I'm open for them to do that with me. So I'm just really intentionally inviting them into our conversation.
Wonderful.
Shivaya.
Thank you so much for that. My whole system feels a lot more relaxed now, especially after our little tech hiccups that we had before. So
Me too.
yeah, I'd love to ask you. I know you're new to Tree Sisters. What it was that drew you to Tree Sisters in the first place?
I've known about Tree Sisters for many years. Trees were my first teachers before water became my focus in 2012. Um, I hadn't felt called to join up until this point because I didn't really have a language for what I do. I didn't know how to share it in the human world. And over the course of the past year or so, that situation has changed. I now understand better who I am and what I'm here to do, and how essential it is for me to work in team. I'm someone who has worked alone for many years, and even as a facilitator, I led and invented my own work, invited people, et cetera, et cetera. But in fact, I cannot work alone anymore, alone in the human world. I've never been alone in my nature world. So in my call for tribe, in trusting that there are others out there like me, or if at least not exactly like me, we're in the same love bubble for nature. And so Tree Sisters, I came to understand when I really investigated it, is such a tremendous portal. It's a way to connect with, first of all, other women who love trees. And then through the groups and the groves and all those, the places in the nest that are available, I can find even more specifically people who share the kind of love I do, meaning other women who love to go and meditate with trees and have actual conversations and share messages. And so I'm deeply grateful to be and feel connected with a sisterhood who would even invite me to come and talk about my particular way of being with my nature relatives. So yeah, that's why I'm here, and even more excited for this connection to these seeds to flower and root and see how high and how wide and how deep we can go together to bring this net of love that the trees model so beautifully, bring it above ground through the human world.
Yeah, I'm that last thing that you said about bringing it above ground, it really makes me think about, and this, I guess, ties into the whole thing of courage. It makes me think about the fact that the dominant paradigm narrative doesn't include communicating with nature, speaking with trees, all of the things that you do and that many Tree Sisters in the network do. And I guess there's probably also a lot of people who wouldn't know necessarily what a nature empath was or what an InterBeing Ambassador is. And so I'd really love it if you could firstly explain those things for us, but also speak to how it is to be, in the world as it is right now, doing these things in you know, where they're not necessarily readily accepted?
For most of my life, I haven't had verbal language. So to begin with the nature empath piece, and why finding a name for what I am has been really a lifelong search. I just turned 60 this year, so 6 decades, and I came in already knowing, already hooked up, but without any understanding or validation from outside. So I've struggled a long time, but knew that my nature allies were the one that were going, go, go, we know who you are. We can't help with that verbal piece, but we love you and keep going. So an empath, as many of us are being educated about now, an empath is someone we process our world through feeling and through intuition. We normally associate those with the right side of our brain. And like many empaths, I have a hugely developed, really bright left brain as well. So I tried to operate in that world for many years before I abandoned it at the age of 30 and went to the right side of my brain and went into the arts. So feeling and intuition. Now, I was born with 3 abilities, which I thought they were curses for most of my life, but I really accept them as gifts now and honor them. So clairsentient means that I can feel what other people are feeling. And I can feel what nature beings are feeling through, and then also clairaudient. So this is where I can hear what people are thinking. And of course, these kinds of things were horrible as a child because I had no idea what to do with this information. Adults would come to me and I could hear what they were thinking before they spoke. And I could feel what they were feeling before they, acted. And because those things didn't match, I was like, you guys are full of shit. At least I know I'm fucked up. You guys are acting like this is normal. So I turned away from the human world literally at the age of 5. And I kept myself away from mainstream society for 45 years, more or less. I couldn't watch, the news or read newspapers. It was too painful for me to see, hear, feel the way humans treat each other and my Mother Earth. So the third ability I have, which a lot of folks have too, is claircognizance, which means I just know. I just know. I know something. I know I'm supposed to do this. I know I'm supposed to go to Southeast Asia. I know that I'm to go to Cape Town. I know that I'm to come here to that kind of thing. And I trust that, and I trust it. So that's the empath piece. Now the nature empath, this is a realization that I came to around 2008. I put this story briefly on the new information on my website, where I was called to Haida Gwaii, the sacred islands of Haida Gwaii. And at that point, the only thing that I could identify was that Mother Nature was my mother. She was my mother. I had a blood mother, a human mother, but Mother Nature was really my true mother, or my first mother. And I thought that's who had called me to the islands, and it turned out that it wasn't. It was both Mother Ocean, a precursor to my bonding with water 4 years later, and also it was the Sitka spruce trees who were my first teacher. They are my primary plant relative, tree relative. Anyways, they called me, I went. I took, which was very rare for me, I actually did a tourist thing. I wanted to go down to the sacred islands of Guayhanes. You can't get there unless you take a float plane, a tour guide, or kayak yourself down there. It's a protected area. So I went with a group of tourists and a guide, and they stopped for lunch at a small island, and they took us into the forest, and they showed us something that the tour guide thought was very marvelous. Of course, I was completely shocked and offended because what they were talking about, they showed us some logging machinery that had been left there since the Second World War. And they had actually gone and cut down the Sitka spruce trees, and they had made a plane called a mosquito bomber. It's a particular kind of plane that was used to transport bombs to kill people. So they used this sacred relative that I had just met and was learning from. They'd use their wood to kill people. So that in itself was like really hard for me to accept. And then Mother Nature and the moss had claimed that space, and it had covered the machinery. The loggers had even left their boots, and their boots were sitting there, and their boots were covered with moss. And so, you know, from an artistic perspective, it was beautiful green. It if you didn't look below the surface, I guess you would say what that tour guide said was, look at this marvelous thing that we can show you. And I was so appalled and so angry, deeply angry. I had to walk away. And I had my Native American flute with me, and I went down the thing and I sat on a log and I just tried to calm down. Of course, I had steam coming out of my ears, and I played my flute. And I played my flute to the trees. And they said thank you to me when I finished. They said thank you. And here's a little beautiful gem that started me understanding their perspective and our perspective and how they can interweave and we can serve each other. So all of a sudden I realized, oh my gosh, here I am playing a red cedar Native American flute, making beautiful music to sing to these beautiful trees. And I'm using their wood because I was in a forest both that had Sitka spruce and had red cedar. And I thought, wow, yeah, that is a gift. And they said to me, we love it, come back anytime. And I'm like, right. You can never know that your wood can make such beautiful music if we as humans don't come and share it with you. So,
I love
you know,
that.
in the middle of like steam coming out of my ears and I wanted to just rant and rave, you know, I went to them. I found that place. I offered them my love through that sound, and then was given this beautiful gift. And you know, that to me is an indication of a lifelong journey in which nature keeps leading me into love, keeps showing me what their first choice is, which is an integrated way of being, which is always allowing, involves life and death. And invariably involves meeting, you know, what they're presented with exactly who they are. So that we continued on with the tour, and it was later that evening that I was home at my friend's place in Masset, at the north part of the island. And I really had what I call a heated conversation with the universe. And this wasn't the first. I spent many years cursing and railing at them. Why did you leave me here, you know, in this godforsaken place? Get me off this planet. Of course, later I realized I chose and stopped, you know, blaming them for putting me here. But in any case, what happened is that I, for years, had been saying, why can't they feel? They, you know, CEOs, corporations, other humans, whoever it is, why don't they feel what they're doing to Mother Earth? Of course, I didn't understand then that lots of people don't feel the way I feel. I mean, it's just a function of the way they are as a human being. And secondly, at that point in 2008, I'd been studying something called conscious language. I had woken up to the fact that my thoughts, my feelings, and my words were part of what was creating the world. So I really understood that what good is it for me to have this deep feeling for Mother Earth if all I was going to do was curse and blame humanity, right? And then add more toxins to the world. And so all of that happened in a flash where I was ranting about what they'd done in the forest. And then I said, I was about to say, why can't they feel? I stopped myself. I heard it in my head. I stopped myself and I said, why do I feel so much? So here's a prime example of asking the right question. Yeah. I've been asking the wrong question, coming out of blame and anger, right? For all those years, I'd been asking the wrong question. The right question was, why do I feel so much? And I was enraged.
I was going to say, I'd love to hear the answer to that question, because I can absolutely relate to everything you're saying, and I can see that there's women watching who also are strongly relating to what you're saying. And so, I would love to know the answer to that question. Yeah.
Which question specifically? Why do I feel so much?
Yeah, yes, that.
Okay, all right, all right. So here's the thing. And this is where I know that, you know, the beings of the universe are so tolerant for me. I'm not someone who, like, you know, I just really come from the gut or from my heart. So, and I was mad, I was angry, and I was frustrated. I've been asking for, you know, 50 years at this point, what am I doing here? Can I just get it over with and get off this planet? Literally, that's all I want to do. All right, just get my work done and go, kind of thing. And so I said, so why do I feel so much? And by the way, you know, I was like, you smarty pants universe, who the hell am I? Right? And literally, as if there was someone standing in the room like a giant, I heard in a big booming voice, you are an interspecies. That's what I heard. That you are an interspecies ambassador. And first of all, I was shocked that there was nobody there. Obviously, I was shocked. And then my entire life flashed before my eyes, all of it, from not wanting to be born and never relating to the normal ways of human behavior and getting married and owning things and houses, like none of it, my entire life. And I was like, I laughed. I said, I burst out laughing and I said, of course I am. Of course I am. Everything made sense in that moment. Why? I didn't belong in the human world. I come in a human body, so as much as I resonate with my nature relatives, I am not them either. And so I occupy this space in between, the worlds. And so I am I'm here to help facilitate harmony between the two worlds because I can live in both. But I don't live fully in either. It's a little bit of that expression, what's the one, be in the world but not of it, or something like that. It's a little bit like that. So of course the next thought of mine was like, oh great, thanks, it makes perfect sense, but what, I'm gonna put it on a resume, you know? It's like, who's gonna hire me? Like, what the fuck, you know? So it was 2 more years. It was 2 more years before I even had an inkling. And what's important to understand is that I was in the middle, at this point when this happened, I was in the final couple of years of a decade-long hip condition, a condition with my hips that had resulted in me actually not being able to walk, sit, or stand for almost 2 years.
Wow.
Yeah. So all this was happening. You know, I left my human relationships, intimate human relationships. Then I got really ill with this hip condition. I went from being an athlete and a dancer to not being able to move, losing my mobility, being housebound, you know, all of that sort of thing. When I got this call, you know, to go to Haida Gwaii. And so it was a couple of years that this interspecies ambassador was rolling around in me. I just didn't know what to do with it, or how could it serve, or, you know, how could it help? So what happened is that in 2009, so it was a bit over a year later, I had my first hip surgery. They finally figured out what's wrong. I was at an age they were willing to do surgery. They did surgery on my first hip, and they found out that I had congenital hip dysplasia. And so what had happened was, you know, predetermined. They could have caught it as a child, but they didn't. Anyways, so I successfully had my first surgery. And 4 months later, I was still in rehab, and I was helping a woman with her house, declutter work and that sort of thing. And I walked out onto her steps, and they're wood. They're wood, and they were wet. And I had 2 heavy things on a shoulder, and I was walking pretty good by then. But I took a step off of the top of this wet wooden stairs, and I slipped. And I was literally in the air with my 2 legs like that. And, you know, I'm highly trained in physical theater and martial arts. And in that split second, I went, oh my God, my left hip, shit. And so I turned myself just 10 degrees in the air and landed on my other hip, the right hip. And I went down the steps, boom, 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 9 times. 9 times with these heavy weights and packages. Needless to say, I was in shock. I hadn't harmed myself, but what it did was, believe it or not, it shook my brain so much that I woke up and realized that I needed to go to the trees, who were, I considered my first relatives, to find out how I was meant to serve as an interspecies ambassador. And that's what I did. I began to sit with and meditate with, and 4 different elder species of trees. Again, you know, I talk about this as if I knew what I was doing. I didn't. I just hear the call and I go. And so I first found out that the Sitka spruce trees, the ones that I had met in Haida, who had affected me so profoundly, that there was a forest of them on the west coast of Vancouver Island. I mean, it's the largest stand of old growth Sitka spruce trees in the world, was right near where I lived, basically where I lived. And so I started to take annual pilgrimages there. And I would go with a friend and we camp up in the parking lot. And then every day I would go down into this absolutely divine plant world. It's the rainforest. There's a small river, ancient, huge trees. And so I would sit with them quietly. And that was the beginning. There were 4 species, as I say: Sitka spruce, willow tree, red cedar, and cottonwood. Those were the 4. And each one they have different characters, like water does. They have different characters and spirits. But essentially, they all taught me the same 3 things. They taught me how to sit still and to slow down. Slow down. Slow down. When I first began, it would take me sometimes 15 minutes of deep, relaxed breathing for my consciousness to even come to meet the consciousness of these great beings. Because as you already know, I'm sure all tree sisters know, trees live in a much slower dimension than ours is. You can even see the minute I started to tune with them, I started to drop in their
I can feel it too. As you're speaking, wisdom slowing down
into their field. Yeah. So they taught me, just by being with them and spending that time, slow down, how to use my breath to do that, how to sit still, like be still, like a tree trunk is, sit still. And then the 3rd thing was how to communicate from my heart to their heart without using any words. And how that exchange can happen so seamlessly, and all the ways that it can happen. Sometimes I would receive an image from a particular tree. Other times I would recall a memory that's related to a feeling or something that's unresolved. And then, you know, their input would put that present experience together with the memory, and all of a sudden, you know, it would get massaged into a different way of being or understanding. Anyways, so those are the 3 things that the trees taught me. Which meant that in 2012, I had moved to the north part of British Columbia at that point. And then Spirit guided me to shift my focus from trees to water. And then I began taking water pilgrimages. But and would sit with water then. And by that time, I was very facile at being able to sit still, breathe. I could drop in 3 breaths. I could drop into a deep, deep heart resonant space. And then I send that out to the river and to meet this. And then the spirit of the river would come back. And so I saw how the trees had trained me and prepared me for the time when I was going to be interfacing and communicating with water and different bodies of water. Yes. And then I'll just finish that little piece there to say that bonding with a river, communicating with a river, is where my sound weaving, my sounding as a way to create a tunnel, a wave, a sound wave through which the water body and myself can communicate. It was the rivers, because I started to sing, and anyone who knows, if you bond with the river heart to heart, it's going to stimulate the flow of your creativity as well as your feelings. And so my sound weaving, which I already did, but it blossomed, it got fuller, and as my heart opened, my sound flowed, and so much of my music comes from that channel. But this is how I learned it. This is how I learned it. So I forget what our original question was. Interspecies ambassador. Yeah. And the reason, yeah.
I was just going to ask you, I'm really curious, in terms of the situation, I guess, that we all find ourselves in the world now, with, you know, the collapse of ecosystems and so many rivers and water bodies polluted and damaged, and, you know, our forests in real trouble. What do you see the role of the interspecies ambassador as, you know, in that bigger picture? Like, where does that fit, and how do you think that can, or do you think that it can actually shift the situation?
I feel called to answer your question first. How do we as a humanity respond to what's happening in the world? Because I think that the role that I have is, it comes out of it comes out of me being a human. And so, as I've already explained, you know, for years, all I could do was reject. I would just reject everything, right? And remove myself. And what water taught me that it's love. And I learned to trust love again, and to love love. And I learned to follow love. I learned to follow love. That's how I navigate, is I follow love and where love is, and I don't go where it isn't. So my first response to your question is, my only response is to love. Is to love. And love means spending time with. Love means listening to other. Love means sharing who I am with other. And so building our relationships with our forests, with our rivers, in whatever condition they're in, which is more challenging than in some situations than in others. Mm-hmm. So it's our job to love, because we all know the power of love. And everything is included in love. So strengthening and building our relationships through our love for trees, our love for that tree, our love for that forest, our love for that river, that to me is the only sane response I have. It's the only response in which I feel my deepest self is called forth to meet the deepest self of that river or that tree. And I truly trust that in the space where love is the only presence and power acting in a situation, that the solutions, the way forward, the shifts in perspective and heart will show themselves. And the more we who love are loving, are actively loving in relationship, not just defending, not just protecting, right? Which creates that polarity, right? That was the problem for me. I was an activist. I was a tree activist, but I had to stop, because I realized that I was promoting sustainability. That's what I wanted, was a sustainable relationship between ourselves and trees. But because I was fighting against the logging companies, I was split inside. So I wasn't sustainable in my own being. And I know enough that, that spiritual law of the universe, as inside, so outside, as above, so below, that's a truth. We can't get around that. So that's why, as an InterBeing ambassador, now I can say more about that specifically, how I've been shown that role can serve. But as a woman, as a human being, my love is accessible to me. I don't have to wait for anybody to give me approval. I I am in control of my love. And that, when we bring groups of us together to a forest, and we come day after day or season after season and year after year, and that bond between those trees or a specific tree and me. So when that tree has something to say, or I have a question I have no answer to, and I go to sit with my tree and I ask my tree, help me to understand, how do I, blah, blah, blah. They answer. And they share their wisdom with us. And then we can take that wisdom and we can walk it into the human world and we can bring it forward. So for me, the answer is always love. It's always love, because everything's included in love. And in that will be the solutions or the new way. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, it totally does. And I'd really love to pick up on what you said about the split when you're, I know there's a lot of us in Tree Sisters who either are or have been at some point real activists. And many, if not most of us, have also run into the hideous burnout that comes from that place of fighting all the time. And, I spent my youth in that place of, what you were talking about earlier, of feeling so frustrated and, fighting against, and why don't they understand, and all of that. And it brought me to my knees, because it's not my natural condition, it kind of makes me want to cry, but I guess we don't really talk about this very often, but my natural condition is to be in that space of love. And, the world that we live in and the culture we live in does not honor that very well. And, says that the only thing that is sort of worth doing is to push back and fight against and try to change, and, all of those things that drain our energy. So I think it's really powerful to hear you say that creates a split inside, that it takes us away from the way that we truly are, and drains that energy. And yeah, I guess I just want to reiterate that, because it felt so important as a something to take in. Yeah. I'm conscious of the time, because it's just whooshed past us.
I want to say one thing before we leave that piece.
Yeah.
Mother Earth, the rivers, even the heavily polluted rivers that I know that are friends of mine, the clear cuts that I've stood in when I've seen how they used to be and I've honored them in song, none of them blame us. They do not blame us. They do not wish that we suffer on their behalf. So if in your work, your sacred work, you are suffering, I invite you to relook at what you're doing. I invite you to stop. Just stop. Because suffering and pain, that is not what we are here to do. We are here to thrive. It is what the central intelligence of the universe is. So I just want to say that they don't blame us. They don't blame us. But what we can do is we can keep returning to that place inside, that place of our self-love, of love itself, where we're there as well as our world is there. And if we're acting from that, if love is part of our way of moving in the world, it is sustainable, and it will never lead us wrong. Never. Yeah. I want to say one tiny thing about the InterBeing Ambassador. So when I did a water ceremony at the United Nations, you talk about courage, man. Fuck. It took every ounce of courage for me to do this. But what was great is that the organizers of the Harmony with Nature Forum were the perfect people for me to bring this. And I'm connected with the Rights of Nature movement. I have a background in law, so it's why I understand why that strategy is very important. Anyways, what I did was I brought water into the room as a stakeholder. And I got permission to do this. I did a ceremony. I did ceremony with Lake Geneva. I invite and brought Lake Geneva's water into the room. I brought Lake Geneva into the room in that moment as our host river, that they were hosting us. And water had its own table. You know the microphones you see at the United Nations? I'm serious. I had people, it went out to the broadcast, the people coming from all over the world for the forum to gather water intentionally from the river and to bring it. And you can see pictures of this. There's all these jars of water and a big, beautiful vase of the Lake Geneva water that I'd gathered, and I brought him in, et cetera, and all these microphones. And as part of the opening ceremony, I invited some of the younger people that were there, and I had them carry bowls of the water around. And I invited people, there's a number of ways I have for people to connect to water, and had them put their hands in and to connect. I said, just connect your heart with the heart of water. It'll happen in a second. And then, allow water to speak through you, through the conference. Anyways, so one of the things that I, as an InterBeing Ambassador, so for example, in my world, my imaginary world, somebody wants to develop some land or to do something that would affect a river or a water, they would call somebody like myself who would come and would talk to the land or would talk to the water and to propose, to let them know what is going on, what is being proposed, to get input from them and to bring their voice into the human world. The other thing that I would do is that I would bring humans to the nature world. So if humans were, again, going to develop something, then I would invite them and help facilitate an experience for them to go and sit in meditation with that river or with that forest and to make a connection and to ask the river, for its input into the situation itself. So it's literally honoring that nature is alive, it has a voice, and to make the space for that voice to be heard. And this is not imaginary for me any longer. I was given these visions and I've been following them because I carry Fraser River inside of me, he's literally in there with me all the time. When I go to China, when I go to Mexico, I'm here in Alaska, he is informing who I am, how I sing, what I bring, right? And now I have Nokapila, the most incredibly, profoundly loving nature being I have ever met. Nokapila, this 400-year-old wild fig tree in Cape Town, South Africa. Oh my gosh, when I realized that she gave me a transmission before I left to put herself inside of me and that she is here and she comes up and she informs my energy, I realized, oh my gosh, I really am here to have interbeing relationships like other people are married to human partners. And so I see that they move around with me. You're talking to us, and I think about the new gender pronoun, the new gender pronoun where some people would like to be called they.
Yeah.
It actually applies to me now because it's Danielea and Fraser and Nokapila and Mount Arunachala. He's a fire mountain in southern India. Anyways.
So I want to ask you a question. I want to finish with a closing question, and it would be wonderful to hear, from all of the they that's there, the answer to this question. So when you were talking about love, Andrea, who's watching, put up a question, and it was, but is love enough? And I would really love you to speak to that as a way of closing.
Love is everything. Love is timeless. Love is endless. Love connects us all. Love is life. Love is light. Everyone is included in love. Love. Love as a verb. Love as a noun. I can hear how the perception of love through the media, through books, through, you know, the romantic love. My challenge would say, yeah, explore. We are the ones that need to expand into the breadth and the width and the power of love. We grow into love. We come from love. We can grow into it and be as big as the love of the universe that created our beautiful planet. So yes, it's the beginning, it's the end, it's the middle. Yeah.
I love that. Thank you so much.
Mm.
So we're gonna have to wrap up because we we went way longer than half an hour, and it was absolutely magical. Thank you so much, Danielea. Yeah, it was really wonderful. Thank you again. And if anybody would like to find out more about what Danielea is doing, I will put a link in the description of this post. And also, if you've enjoyed this interview and you would love to support the trees, please do come and join us as a monthly donor for the trees and help us plant trees in the tropics, which you can do by going to treesisters.org/donate. That would be fantastic. And also come and join us in the Nest. If you Google Tree Sisters Nest,
Yeah.
that's our online closed community. It's beautiful. There's lots of wonderful things happening in there. Do come and join us in there. Thank you so much. Thank you so
Yes.
much, Danielea.
Yeah. And I'm so open if people are wishing to talk about, you know, anything. Yes, find me on Facebook, contact me directly or through the website. And that song that I mentioned to you, the trees gave to me, I will be recording it and I'll be sharing it in some way. So that'll be coming soon too.
Oh, wonderful. Yeah, that would be brilliant. I'm
Yay.
so looking forward to hearing that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you so
Okay.
much.
You're
Bye-bye,
welcome.
everyone.
Bye.
Bye.